Outpost 39 was the kind of place where even boredom had to stand in line. Suspended in the dead orbit of a long-dead gas giant, it served as a customs checkpoint, diplomatic cold storage, and galactic complaint box all rolled into one. On any given day, you'd find at least one bureaucrat crying in the restroom and a cargo inspector arguing with a robot over the definition of flammable. It was the perfect place to stash personnel who were too valuable to discharge and too disruptive to assign anywhere that mattered. Sergeant Buck Malone hated it, with every fiber of his beef jerky-scented being. Buck was human, all-American, and deeply committed to never retiring. 47, built like an industrial fridge, with a shaggy mullet that defied interstellar regulation, he still wore a faded yippee-ki-yay tank top under his flak vest. His presence was a living challenge to fashion, safety protocols, and galactic diplomacy. Buck had been everywhere and pissed off at least one person on every continent, planet, and dimension. He wasn't dangerous in the traditional sense. He was worse. He was unpredictable. At 0900 local station time, Buck strolled into Docking Bay 6 with a styrofoam cup of what the outpost insisted was coffee. His boots clanked with the heavy rhythm of a man who knew his own legend and didn't mind stepping on a few toes. He squinted at the manifest screen, tapped it twice, and grunted. "That can't be right," he muttered. "Only 3 crates of eggs? What happened to the Texas shipment?" Behind him, a shimmering wall of silver armor approached. The figure moved with the grace of oil on marble, each step punctuated by the soft hum of anti-grav plates. He was tall, elegant, and unmistakably condescending. Corporal Zintor of the Galactic Vanguard considered himself a specimen of perfected evolution. With smooth violet skin, eyes that glowed faintly with quantum intuition, and a jaw sharp enough to split atoms, Zintor was a model soldier of the new regime. He was also a pain in the ass. "You are in violation of Regulation 6.7, Article 3. Beverage containment in unauthorized zones," he announced, his voice lilting with the smugness of someone who has never lost a debate and never been invited to a barbecue. Buck took a sip of his coffee and grimaced. "You can quote your alphabet soup rules all day, spaceboy. You ever tasted this sludge? Only thing it violates is the Geneva Convention." Zintor's mouth twitched. "That reference is obsolete. Earth's cultural relics are irrelevant in this sector." "That's so." Buck turned to face him fully, eyebrows arched. "Tell that to half your crew binge-watching Baywatch last night. Didn't know gills could blush." The room tensed. Even the loading drones hesitated. Zintor stepped forward, lowering his voice to an icy register. "You are insolent, undisciplined, and emblematic of Earth's primitive dysfunction." Buck tossed the coffee into a nearby disposal chute, shrugged, and smiled the way a shark might smile at a leaky canoe. "Better insolent than insufferable. You walk around like you own the galaxy, but I've seen cockroaches with better manners. Hell, I've dated cockroaches with better manners." A crowd began to gather. Station staff, a couple of diplomats pretending to check their data pads, even a Martian fry cook still wearing his grease-stained apron. Buck was a known quantity. Zintor was new. Spectacle was inevitable. "I will not be mocked by a carbon sack in a stolen tank top," Zintor snapped, his eyes glowing brighter now. Buck leaned in just enough for the tension to tighten like a tripwire. "Careful, Junior. You're 4 seconds from regretting everything." Zintor's arm moved in a blur, a swift, precise motion honed by years of combat simulation. His open palm cracked against Buck's cheek with an audible snap, loud enough to echo off the bulkheads. Silence fell like a dropped coffin lid. The slap was clean, cold, deliberate. Buck didn't flinch. He blinked once, exhaled slowly through his nose, and turned back to the manifest screen. He tapped it twice more, as if the blow hadn't happened, as if the entire room wasn't watching in disbelief. Zintor stood frozen, unsure whether his display of dominance had succeeded or backfired. 1 second passed. Buck reached into his vest and pulled out a toothpick. He placed it between his lips, chewed gently, then glanced over his shoulder with eyes like calm before a bar fight. "You got 3 seconds now." Zintor's expression flickered. Second 2. Buck cracked his neck left, then right. The sound was loud, deliberate, like someone racking a shotgun made of bones. Second 3. The crowd began to shift backward. They knew something was coming. The tension had changed flavor, from awkward to electric. "I do not fear you," Zintor said, trying to maintain composure. "I represent the authority of the Galactic Vanguard. Your threats mean nothing to me." Buck stepped forward, toe to toe, close enough that Zintor could see the faded ink of a Betty Boop tattoo peeking from Buck's shoulder. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Son, I once neutralized a Xeno-berserker colony using only duct tape and a VHS copy of Roadhouse. I am the reason your species has mandatory helmet padding." Zintor's lip twitched. He raised his hand again, slower this time, uncertain. Buck didn't move. He just stared. 4th second. The crowd collectively held its breath. Somewhere, someone whispered, "Oh no." Buck raised a single eyebrow. "Time's up." A siren blared. Security override. Someone had triggered it remotely. Station Chief Balros, a crusty, over-caffeinated half-cyborg administrator, came barreling in on a magnetic cart, arms waving. "Stand down, both of you. This station is not your personal deathmatch arena." Buck didn't respond. His eyes remained locked on Zintor. Zintor blinked. Something shifted behind the bravado. He glanced at the forming crowd, at the smirks, the half-covered grins, the data pads recording, from clever angles. The slap had been public. The reaction was viral. This wasn't just a disciplinary concern. It was a diplomatic incident brewing faster than instant oatmeal. Zintor started, his voice catching. Buck leaned in, voice low and steady. "You want to finish that sentence or start writing your apology note in Morse code on a bedpan?" Zintor swallowed hard. The room held still, waiting for the outcome. He started again, this time softer. "Perhaps I acted in haste." Buck's jaw twitched. "Say it." Zintor took a breath that reeked of pride dying a slow death. "I'm sorry." Buck stepped back, nodding. "There you go. See, we can all be civilized. That wasn't so hard." The security drones stood down. Balros sighed and rubbed his synthetic temple. The crowd slowly dispersed, whispering excitedly. On 3 different holo feeds, the slap and its aftermath had already reached over 2 million views. Zintor stood frozen, fists clenched at his sides, shame burning a hole through his ceremonial breastplate. Buck gave him a hearty slap on the back, not hard, but hard enough to make him stagger. "Next time you feel like asserting dominance," Buck said, "start with someone who didn't bench press a hover tank last week for fun." Zintor didn't answer. He simply turned and walked away, movements stiff, regal posture cracked. Buck turned to Balros, who stared at him with the exhausted glare of someone who'd seen too much and slept too little. "Malone, you absolute hurricane of chaos. You realize the paperwork this is going to generate?" Buck popped his toothpick out with a grin. "Relax, Chief. I de-escalated." Balros opened his mouth, thought better of it, and left muttering something about early retirement. Buck turned back to the now empty bay. He retrieved his coffee cup from the chute, stared into its abyssal contents, and made a face. Still better than the diplomatic lounge. And somewhere across the galaxy, the footage continued to spread, frame by frame, second by second, each replay sharpening the legend of a man who didn't flinch when slapped, didn't blink under threat, and didn't back down from anyone, no matter how shiny their armor. The clock had started. 4 seconds was all it had taken. And now the galaxy was watching. The footage of Zintor's public humiliation spread faster than a sneeze on a space shuttle. Within 12 hours, it had been translated into 46 languages, subtitled in emojis, remixed with an 80s synth track, and uploaded into the neural entertainment feeds of half the quadrant. It was titled 4 Seconds of Regret, Mullet Justice, and, in one particularly aggressive Martian translation, How to Get Slapped into Shame by a Mammal. What should have been a disciplinary footnote became an interstellar meme. What should have been forgotten by lunch was now viral canon. Sergeant Buck Malone, meanwhile, was doing what he did best. Absolutely nothing helpful. He sat in the outpost, mess, surrounded by half-eaten rations and a cluster of junior personnel waiting for their daily dose of unsolicited wisdom. Buck was halfway through a story involving a malfunctioning food replicator, 3 gallons of synthetic gravy, and a very confused ambassador from the Andromeda Trade Consortium when Chief Balros stormed in, breathing like a lawnmower with asthma. "I need to talk to you," Balros said, already regretting it. Buck didn't look up from his tray. "If it's about the video, I already told Zintor to chin up. That kind of fame doesn't come easy." Balros slammed a datapad on the table hard enough to knock a spoon into someone's lap. "We just got a message from High Command. The Vanguard is sending a diplomatic team to investigate claims of cultural misconduct. They're saying the slap was a trigger for an interpersonal incident of galactic scale. Do you have any idea what that means?" Buck finally looked up. "Sounds like a load of polished turd in a gold bucket. It means you've insulted their honor," Balros snapped. "They think you're a symbol of Earth's insubordination. They want a formal hearing." Buck nodded slowly as if the words had to wade through decades of stubborn. "Let me guess. They're sending some clean-cut, triple-decorated anti-sass poster boy with a stick so far up his spine it tickles his frontal lobe." "Not exactly." Balros pinched the bridge of his nose. "They're sending General Kralox." Buck raised an eyebrow. "The one who punched a battle cruiser in half during the Orion siege? The very same." "Well, hell," Buck said, standing up and wiping crumbs off his chest. "It's been a while since I met someone with actual muscles. Maybe we'll arm wrestle over beers. Real bonding experience." Balros rubbed his temples. Harder. "They're not coming for beers, Malone. They're coming for you. This isn't a meet and greet. This is a show of force. They're coming to remind Earth who's in charge of this galaxy." Buck grinned. "They've tried that before. Didn't stick. Damn it, Buck, this is serious. If they decide you're a political liability, then they'll what? Deport me? Put me in timeout? I've been exiled from more systems than most of these galactic peacocks have even visited. They want a fight. They can have one." Balros sighed so hard it almost rebooted the room's ventilation. "You can't solve every problem with fists and sarcasm. Hasn't failed me yet," Buck said. At that exact moment, across the galaxy in a Vanguard battlecruiser shaped like a chrome arrowhead dipped in ego, General Kralox watched the infamous footage for the 12th time. His expression didn't change. His 5 eyes remained fixed on the screen. His secondary hearts beat in unison like a war drum played by accountants. His aide, a twitchy Arcturian lieutenant with skin like moss and posture like a question mark, waited silently. "This? Human," Kralox said finally. "He is..." "What?" "Sergeant Buck Malone, Earth Defense Forces. Decorated in 13 campaigns. Dishonorably discharged twice. Reinstated due to emergencies both times. Currently assigned to Outpost 39, where..." Kralox raised a finger, silencing the aide with a motion so precise it could have sliced a comet. "I have seen warriors fall. I have seen cities burn. But I have never seen someone not react to a ceremonial slap. He did imply Zintor's armor made him look like a polished teapot." Kralox stared. "And there were mullet-related comments. And something about gills watching Baywatch." Kralox leaned back. "The humans are weaponizing mockery. That does appear to be the pattern, sir." And it works? The aide hesitated. Surprisingly, yes. Kraylock stood, every inch of him honed like a weapon forged in sarcasm's hell. Prepare my armor. We will meet this warrior. We will end this insult before it spreads further. Sir, should we inform Earth Command? Kraylock narrowed his eyes. Let them watch. Let the galaxy see. Back on Outpost 39, Buck was engaged in what he called tactical napping, which mostly meant laying on a cargo crate and muttering things like flank maneuver in his sleep. He didn't need pre-battle rituals. He was the ritual. His reputation preceded him like a drunken uncle at a family wedding. Loud, unpredictable, and probably carrying fireworks. But even Buck didn't expect what came next. The Vanguard ship arrived with enough pomp to make a parade jealous. Trumpets blared. Flags unfolded from nowhere. Security drones danced like synchronized swimmers on meth. General Kraylock descended like the wrath of 17 angry planets rolled into one smoldering scowl. Buck didn't flinch. He stood in front of Docking Bay 1, arms folded, wearing a sleeveless tee with "Make My Day" written in neon pink. Kraylock towered over him, 7 feet of armored menace. His voice boomed with the authority of 1,000 bureaucratic nightmares. You are the one called Malone. That's what the tax collectors keep telling me. You have insulted a soldier of the Galactic, Vanguard. Slapped me first. I just gave him 4 seconds to rethink life. You represent the ungoverned chaos of Earth, and you represent the humor vacuum of the known universe. Guess we're even. A hush spread. The two stood eye to eye, despite the height difference. A clash of empires. A duel not of fists, yet, but of willpower and wit. Kraylock narrowed his eyes. This is your final warning. The next time you disgrace our command, there will be no mercy. Buck's grin never faltered. Mercy's overrated. I prefer barbecue sauce. Kraylock turned, armor clanking with righteous fury, and stormed back to his ship. No fight. No arrest. Just a challenge delivered, and a gauntlet left hanging in the air like a suspended punchline. Balros approached cautiously. You just told a galactic warlord he has no sense of humor. He doesn't. You do realize this is going to escalate, right? Good, Buck said. Maybe it's time the galaxy learned what Earth humor really means. The outpost's lights dimmed. As the Vanguard ship departed, trailing indignation and orchestral music, Buck stood alone, calm and casual, as if he hadn't just poked a hornet nest armed with lasers. And somewhere in the digital corners of the galaxy, new footage began to circulate. Buck facing down Kraylock, unblinking, unbothered, undiplomatic. The legend grew. Back in the mess hall, someone added a new title to the feed. When you send a general, but he meets an 80s action movie. The galaxy had laughed. Then it paid attention. Now it was watching. Closely. Waiting. And Buck Malone, Earth's most problematic patriot, was just getting started. The galaxy had barely recovered from the aftershocks of Buck's slap when the real storm began to stir. The diplomatic channels buzzed with fury, the holovids flared with debate, and each new message coming in from the Vanguard was more insistent than the last. Earth Command had tried to tamp down the fire, sending out the usual "we're sorry for the misunderstanding" scripts. But when the Vanguard issued a formal demand for a one-on-one showdown between their finest and Buck Malone, Earth Command knew the stakes had gone up. For once, they weren't just trying to get Buck out of trouble. They were wondering if he could turn this chaos into a win. Sergeant Buck Malone, however, wasn't about to take orders from anyone. He was, as always, in his own lane, oblivious to the stakes, and entirely consumed by a different kind of problem. The latest shipment of snacks, crucial for his survival on Outpost 39, had been delayed. This wasn't just any snack either. These were his carefully curated collection of chili-flavored meat sticks and powdered coffee packs. His latest stash had been confiscated by one of the junior officers on a health initiative, and the situation was growing dire. Standing outside the storage room, Buck crossed his arms, staring at the young officer who had mistakenly thought they could talk about personal health goals. "You do realize that if I don't get my hands on those chili sticks soon," Buck said, voice dropping into a menacing growl, "I'll have to start using all these other skills you clearly don't want to see." The officer, a skinny kid from the outer colonies who hadn't yet learned the art of diplomatic survival, shifted uncomfortably under Buck's glare. I just thought, maybe you could use a little less sodium in your diet, Sergeant." "Kid, you clearly have no idea what you're dealing with. You can take away my food, my luxuries, my sleep, but the second you start messing with my chili sticks, that's when we're going to have a problem." The kid stammered something about health, protocols, but Buck was already past him. He didn't need to hear it. The only protocol he adhered to was, don't get in the way of Buck when he's hungry. With a dramatic flourish, he retrieved the food from the shelf, ignoring the officer's protests. As he walked away, an alert popped up on his wrist comm. It was a direct message from General Kralox. The Vanguard's representative had finally decided to stop sending threats and had chosen the perfect moment to escalate things to the next level. "I'll be on Outpost 39 by sunrise tomorrow. Come prepared to face the consequences. General Kralox, Vanguard Military." Buck clicked off the message with a smile that would have sent chills down the spine of anyone who knew him well. He tossed the wrist comm onto his bunk, his fingers already itching for action. He wasn't worried. He'd dealt with worse. He'd dealt with way worse. This Kralox guy might be big, but Buck had a thing or two up his sleeve that no amount of muscle or galactic reputation could prepare for. He casually strolled into the mess hall, his snacking problem momentarily forgotten, as the wheels of the conflict in his mind began to spin into motion. The crew sat at tables discussing the potential ramifications of the upcoming showdown, but Buck ignored them. He wasn't one for groupthink or strategic meetings. No, he had an instinct for these things, an instinct that told him that if Kralox wanted a fight, Buck would make sure the Galactic General got more than he bargained for. It was time to turn the tables. The comms officer looked up from his station as Buck entered. "Sir, you've seen the message." Buck grinned. "I'm not worried. The universe may not know it yet, but Kralox just walked right into my wheelhouse." The officer raised an eyebrow, unsure of what to make of the remark, but before he could respond, a loud crash echoed through the hall. The metal doors flew open with a force that shook the entire building, revealing the looming silhouette of General Kralox, flanked by his elite Vanguard soldiers. The moment he stepped into the room, everything stopped. Conversations ceased. Every person in the room stood frozen, eyes trained on the incoming force. Kralox's heavy steps reverberated like thunder on the metal floors. His body, encased in layered armor, gleamed under the artificial lights, a walking fortress. His eyes, 4 of them, all stared straight at Buck. There was no hesitation, no diplomacy in his gaze, just pure, raw authority. "Sergeant Buck Malone," Kralox's voice boomed. "You've defied the order of the Vanguard. You've insulted the honor of the galaxy. Your actions will be met with appropriate consequences." Buck, looking entirely unbothered, took a bite of one of his precious chili sticks before wiping his mouth on his sleeve. "Well, damn. I was hoping we could at least get some nachos in this mess hall before we did the whole consequence thing." The room's tension ramped up tenfold, but Buck didn't seem to notice. He slowly leaned against the wall, savoring the spice of his snack, as Kralox took another step forward, clearly itching for some kind of retaliation. His soldiers moved in close, weapons raised, though none dared to fire, yet. "We do not take kindly to jokes about our authority," Kralox said, his tone darkening. "Oh, trust me," Buck replied, still chewing. "I'm not joking. But, you? You're standing in a mess hall that 5 minutes ago had a much better vibe. You might want to lighten up." Kralox's four eyes narrowed as the tension between them escalated. His soldiers shifted slightly, sensing the volatile nature of the moment. Kralox didn't want to admit it, but he was taken aback by Buck's casual demeanor. Few had ever been this flippant in the face of such power. But Kralox was no stranger to fear, and he wasn't about to let a single human shake his composure. "You're testing my patience, Malone," Kralox growled. "The time for games is over." Buck's grin widened as he tossed his snack to the side. "Games? Oh, no, this isn't a game. It's a demonstration. See, the thing is, Kralox, you've made a huge mistake. Coming here, thinking you can teach Earth a lesson in humility. This whole thing? It's not about honor. It's not about discipline. It's about you not understanding what happens when you push people too far." Kralox's hand twitched near his weapon as the words sunk in. The soldiers around him grew uneasy, wondering just how much longer this game of cat and mouse could. "Go on? You think you can outwit me, Malone?" Kralox asked, his voice a low growl. "Not outwit," Buck said with a laugh. "Just outlast." And just like that, the first crack in Kralox's iron exterior appeared. He'd expected a confrontation. What he got was something far more disorienting: humor, defiance, and a sense of casual control from a species he had underestimated. He could feel the uncertainty ripple through his soldiers, and a thought gnawed at the edges of his consciousness. Maybe, just maybe, he had underestimated Earth. The general's gaze didn't break, but for the first time, Buck saw something flicker in the warlord's posture. Something other than anger. It was caution. And that, for Buck, was the first step toward victory. "Let's make this interesting, Kralox," Buck said, his voice even. "Why don't you show me what you've got? But fair warning, I'm not going easy on you. You're about to get a lesson in Earth's brand of diplomacy." Kralox took a deep breath. This wasn't the battle he had envisioned. But then again, nothing about this human had gone according to plan. And now, both sides were about to find out if Buck Malone's brand of chaos could actually change the rules of the game. The standoff in the mess hall stretched for an eternity, as the tension in the air thickened with each passing second. Kralox's soldiers stood at attention, weapons still raised, though their fingers hovered uncertainly over the triggers. They had been trained to intimidate, to crush the spirits of their enemies with a simple show of force. But here they were, faltering in the presence of a human. A mere human. This was no ordinary soldier, no standard soldier, but a force unto himself, as unpredictable as he was, unshakable. Buck Malone leaned against the wall, casually adjusting the sleeve of his uniform. His gaze never wavered from Kralox. To any observer, the disparity between the two was laughable. One stood encased in gleaming alien armor, bristling with an array of weapons, while the other wore the confident, carefree demeanor of someone who had just woken up from a nap and was figuring out what to have for lunch. The contrast was striking, and it was that very contrast that made Kralox uneasy. Kralox's mind raced. His mission here was simple: intimidate, defeat, and subjugate. But this human, this man, this Sergeant Malone, refused to bend. The boldness, the audacity. It was infuriating, and yet at some primal level, it ignited a spark of respect. Kralox didn't like that feeling. It wasn't in his nature to respect anyone, let alone a human. "Enough games," Kralox finally said, his voice dangerously low. "You will submit to the Vanguard's authority, Sergeant Malone. This is not a negotiation. This is your last chance to surrender." Buck smiled, unfazed. "Surrender? Nah, I'm not into the whole giving up thing, not my style. Besides, you've got a lot of pressure on you right now, don't you? I mean, look at you." He took a step forward, his eyes never leaving Kralox's four-gaze stare. "You came here with an army, all high and mighty, and now you're standing in my mess hall like it's some sort of showdown. That's a lot to carry. But I'm just A guy who loves his chili sticks. The absurdity of it all left Kralox momentarily speechless. He wasn't sure if Buck was mocking him or if this was just his way of dealing with a threat. Either way, the feeling of his soldiers' unease was growing. He had to act fast. He couldn't afford to let this human continue with his humiliating mockery. He gave a sharp signal, and his soldiers stepped forward, weapons raised. But Buck didn't flinch. He just stretched, as though preparing for an evening jog rather than a battle for his life. "Here's the thing, Kralox," Buck said, a sudden edge in his voice. "You're so used to being the top dog. You've got all this firepower, all this fancy tech, but none of that matters when you're facing someone who knows how to turn the tables. You want to teach me a lesson in authority? Good luck with that. I've been on the other end of that stick more times than I can count, and I'm still standing. You're gonna need more than your little toy soldiers to take me down." Kralox scowled, his patience wearing thin. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, human. The vanguard does not kneel. We conquer. We destroy. You will bow before me." "You keep saying that," Buck said with a lazy grin. "But you haven't shown me anything I can't handle yet." He let out a short chuckle. "Maybe if you had some snacks, you'd be a little more reasonable." The absurdity of the situation was too much for Kralox to process. In his mind, he should have been in control. He had the power. He had the technology. And yet here was this human, this insufferable human, continuing to make a mockery of his every attempt to assert dominance. "Enough of this," Kralox snarled, his eyes narrowing to slits. With a swift motion, he raised his arm and pointed directly at Buck. "Prepare yourself, Sergeant. I'm going to make sure you regret this." Buck didn't budge. He just stood there, hands casually resting on his hips. Yeah, I've heard it before." "What? You gonna try and zap me with your little plasma beam?" "I've fought worse than you, Kralox." The general's eyes flickered for a brief moment, and then the air around him crackled with energy. It was the signature move of the vanguard, a blast of pure plasma that could disintegrate anything in its path. But Buck was already moving. With a speed that belied his casual demeanor, Buck dove to the side, rolling into a smooth crouch as the plasma blast scorched the air where he had been standing just a fraction of a second earlier. He came up to his feet in one fluid motion, grinning ear to ear. "Really? That's the best you've got?" Buck laughed, his voice filled with mockery. "You might want to check that aim, pal. If you can't even hit a guy who's standing still, what's the point of having all that fancy gear?" The soldiers around Kralox hesitated, visibly shaken by the display. None of them had expected their general's power to be so easily evaded. But this human wasn't just skilled, he was relentless. Kralox's fury surged. He was no longer dealing with a mere soldier. He was facing an entire philosophy, a mindset that didn't know when to quit. And that was the most dangerous thing in the universe. This human's resilience was a weapon far deadlier than anything Kralox had ever encountered. "Enough!" Kralox shouted, raising both hands to the sky. "If it's a fight you want, it's a fight you'll get." The ground trembled as Kralox unleashed a wave of energy that pulsed outward, knocking several nearby tables over. The soldiers rushed to brace themselves, but Buck barely moved. He'd been in worse situations. Before, situations where he'd had nothing but his wits and instincts to rely on. "Now you're talking," Buck said with enthusiasm. "This is more like it." He dashed forward, his movements fluid and precise, a blur of motion as he closed the gap between himself and the vanguard general. Kralox lashed out, his fist glowing with a crackling energy, but Buck sidestepped, his grin widening. "You've got power," Buck said as he dodged another attack. "I'll give you that, but you still don't know how to use it." "You're too slow, Kralox. You're too predictable." The general's frustration mounted with every failed strike. He was fast, faster than most, but Buck's timing, his unpredictability, and his sheer force of will were beginning to unravel Kralox's confidence. This wasn't a battle for control. It was a battle for survival, and Buck had always been at his best when his back was against the wall. "You should have stayed in your lane, Kralox," Buck said as he slid underneath a wild strike. "You might be big, but you've got nothing on Earth." The words stung, and Kralox's frustration reached its peak. With a roar of fury, he charged at Buck, using every ounce of his strength to deliver a crushing blow. But Buck was already gone, darting to the side and leaving Kralox to swing at nothing but air. Buck looked back, a gleam of satisfaction in his eyes. "See, that's the thing, Kralox," he said, his voice loud and clear. "You keep thinking that strength alone will win the day. But you're forgetting one thing." He paused, letting the words settle. "It's not about strength. It's about will." With that, Buck launched himself forward, determined to make Kralox understand the true meaning of underestimating humanity. And this time, there would be no escape for the mighty general.